Well, it's a historic moment for the European Broadcasting Union. This is certainly one of the most serious crises that the organization has ever faced. Next year, we're going to see the biggest political boycott of Eurovision ever. So this controversy is certainly not going to end with the vote today. Well, on the table today, they were voting about changes to the Eurovision rules, changes which will address some of the criticisms made of the voting in the contest, the politicization of the voting in the contest, especially in light of the campaigns that were run to promote the Israeli entries in the last 2 years. So it was the changes that were voted on, not directly Israel's participation. Well, first of all, the concern was the war in Gaza. This is something that members of the European Broadcasting Union have criticized Israel for. They say that the Israeli broadcaster shouldn't be participating in Eurovision because of the war in Gaza and the humanitarian crisis. So they see this as an opportunity to stand by political values that they believe they represent. That's number one. Number two is the question of media freedom. They also criticize the fact that media freedom, media reporting on Gaza has been restricted by the Israeli authorities, that journalists have even been killed in the course of the war in Gaza. And then they criticize the Israeli broadcasters' behavior in Eurovision, the fact that the Israeli broadcaster has sent entries which have alluded to political issues, especially the attacks on Israel of October 7, as well as the fact that the Israeli government did sponsor campaigns to garner votes from across the world for the Israeli entries. The countries that have been most vocal in their criticisms of Israel have been Spain and Slovenia, which before this meeting said that they would boycott next year's edition of Eurovision if Israel were allowed to participate. So this has been confirmed. Ireland and the Netherlands have since also confirmed that they will not be participating next year. Iceland has long been a critic of Israel's participation in Eurovision. If we go back to the contest in 2019 in Tel Aviv, the Icelandic act Hatari was even fined for waving Palestinian scarves in the green room when the voting results were announced in the grand final. So these are the countries that have been most critical of Israel. That was also reflected in the proceedings today. On the other hand, Austria, which will host the contest next year, has called for Israel to be allowed to participate, and Germany has also been a vocal supporter of Israel, Switzerland too, Luxembourg as well. So this is basically how it looks in terms of the camps, but in the end today, a majority of broadcasters, members of the European Broadcasting Union, voted in favor of the rule changes, which also means that they didn't want to vote on participation in next year's contest, meaning that they also support Israel's continued participation in Eurovision.
Two more.
Politics has always played a role in Eurovision. Whenever you have countries competing against each other, things are bound to get political. Remember that the acts are submitted by national broadcasters, but they appear under the names of countries. Now, if we go back to the first Eurovision in 1956, a political message was sent by West Germany when it was represented by a Jew and a Holocaust survivor. Since then, we've seen a lot of political statements being made. We've also seen several boycotts, but the boycotts have usually been bilateral. So very different to the mass boycott that will take place next year. Now, the first boycott actually occurred in 1969. It was by Austria, which refused to send an entry to the Eurovision Song Contest that was held in that year in Madrid. Austria protested that year because it didn't support the dictatorship of Francisco Franco. So it's rather ironic that now Austrians the Austrian broadcaster is calling for Eurovision not to be boycotted next year, even though it was actually Austria that began the history of boycotts in Eurovision. In more recent years, we've seen a boycott from Russia when Eurovision was staged in Kiev in 2017. We also saw Armenia boycott when Eurovision was staged in Baku in 2012. But as I mentioned, these boycotts have usually been bilateral. Next year will be the first mass political boycott of Eurovision in its history.
And
Well, the days and weeks to come are certainly going to be tense as countries confirm their participation in Eurovision. It is likely that more countries will boycott. Public opinion is certainly in favor of that in many countries, particularly the Nordic countries. So I do think that there will be more discussions of potential boycotts in many countries. And I also think that we're going to see big protests at Eurovision next year, fueled by these boycotts. We have to remember that there have been movements calling for a boycott of Eurovision because of Israel for several years now, since 2019, since the contest in Tel Aviv. That's when the pro-Palestinian boycott, divest, sanctions movement first called for countries to boycott Eurovision because of Israel. Now we finally see those boycotts happening. No boycotts happened because of Israel until now. So I think, this is fuel for further boycotts. And next year's edition is certainly going to be one of the most politicized ever. It's the 70th anniversary. It was meant to be a big celebration, a big party, but it's going to be shrouded in political controversy yet again.